Welcome to Three, a show about Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, and part of the Tennis Channel podcast network. I'm Gill with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy, and today we are celebrating our 100th episode. It is not our 100th episode, but it came during Wimbledon. We had real important business to take care of, and now we are going to take our time to appreciate 100 episodes in our first ever Q&A format. It has been, let me just start by saying it has been a pleasure doing this show with you guys, Joel and Amy. It's been incredible. And I figured we should let everyone know kind of how this started. I think because most people joined in at some point along the journey. Amy, I had you on my show. It was during the pandemic pause where I was talking about matches from the past, and we did the Serena versus Clijsters semifinal at the US Open. Mm-hmm. And then you came to me a couple weeks later with this idea, right?
Right. So just to take it back a little bit, Joel and I met at an event called Tennis Congress, which I've done some video work for. And it's an event for passionate adult amateur players. And we just hit it off immediately and would talk on the phone about tennis for hours and hours and hours. And I wanted to go back and read, dozens of Joel's pieces that he'd done. And I ended up reading his most recent book and just like instant friendship. And we decided that we wanted to do a podcast. Well, we started just like messing around kind of in beta with something called Crosses and Mains. And with Joel and I, it just wasn't working because we would talk on the phone for a couple of hours and then we would hit record and we would kind of like be confused about what was on the phone, and our conversations were drifting and branching, and the podcast did not have focus. So then we knew we needed a third. We needed someone who could direct traffic, but also could bring the knowledge and the insights like you can. And then the idea to do something on Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic came up because I really just wanted to do something that people cared about. And the whole reason that I used to be a general assignment sportscaster, and I wanted to do tennis because of these three players. I wanted to just focus specifically on these three. And these guys drew me in, and it was something that nobody else was doing.
That's pretty darn accurate and thoughtful. And just to add, without being too superfluous, to go back even to meeting at the Tennis Congress, Amy and I had talked about podcasts, and I was thinking of doing one myself, and Amy was wanting to do one. And since I'm a tennis person, I wanted to do it myself. I wanted to do it as a solo. And most of my life as a writer, a lot of my things are very much kind of my own kind of show. I mean, I write for people, but I like being my own person. And Amy kind of kicked my butt and said, "Hey, we'll do it as part of a team." And she explained the things that she and I could each bring. And again, as Amy pointed out, we were kind of stumbling a little bit, unsure how to do it. And then we found you, Gill, and you're like the glue, and you helped make it all happen. So it has been great working with both of you. I think chatting with both of you, we bring some really neat different things to it all, our respective backgrounds, and it's been really great.
Thanks. And yeah, so Joel, you went from singles to doubles to now Canadian doubles.
Oh, this is like the workout. This is the 2-on-1 workout, like the famous two people in the net, make the guy run, right? We're suffering, two at the baseline, one at the net. That's right. That's right.
And this is no disrespect to Canadians, but that is the one game that I will not play is Canadian doubles. Whenever I have three on a tennis court because somebody's dropped out or something, I insist that we play rotating singles points. So
I do rotating singles points. However, there's some drill, you can do the drill, you can do the two at the net volleying, but mostly, yeah, I know what you mean. I wonder, we should look up, how did that get called Canadian doubles? Is that like Canadian bacon or something? Anyway, it's great. And so we've got a nice team, and how great that the people who listen and watch our show offer us a lot of comments and a lot of energy around these three guys and their tennis. So it's great.
Well, We rarely talk about ourselves, but I'm sure that a lot of you guys will enjoy hearing how this all came about. Now let's get to the questions. Big three focused, and unfortunately couldn't get to them all, but I picked out a few, and thank you to everyone who commented, which was like over 75 of you guys, which was amazing. We start with Milan. When you three all reflect on the trajectory of the big three individually, respectively, what was the key pivot points or moments for each GOAT's tennis journey for each of you where you went, wow, this guy is special or is going to be really, really special?
Wow. Okay. I can think of a couple as a start. And by the way, to the audience, Amy and I don't know these questions, so we'd have no idea as Gill's bringing them to us. So this is right off our head. I was at the Sampras Federer match at Wimbledon 2001, and I'd heard and maybe I'd watched Federer on TV, and that was really impressive just to see Roger. It didn't mean, yeah, this guy's going to win 20 majors, as much as just saying this guy's got some real sweet skill here, and it's really neat to see. 2007. It's always great when we see these guys in person. I saw Novak when he won Miami, his first Tennis Masters 1000 title, and was still 19. He was a teenager, and I watched him when he beat player Cañas. You remember Cañas, Gill, your kind of player, very formidable Argentine, very fit, and had beaten Federer in that tournament, and Novak beat him in straight sets in a best-of-5 final. So those were two, and then Nadal. It was TV before oh wait, no. Yeah, I saw Nadal beat Federer in Miami on TV. So when he beat him the first time in 2004, and that was impressive for me. Those are early pivot moments for those three.
First of all, Milan, thank you. You're one of my favorite commenters. I always look for your comments, and really, I just want to thank all of our listeners and viewers. Your comments and just the fact that you do listen and watch just means the world to me. Let's see. I'll start with Nadal, and I'm sorry to say I don't remember what year it was, but it was extremely early in his career. He had not won any majors, and I was just a young local TV sports reporter in Connecticut, where I live. And Nadal was playing James Blake, who was the hometown hero, and there was almost nobody it was up at Yale University, and they have like a center court, and there was almost no one there. So I was permitted to go down and sit in the photographer's well so I could see the whole thing at eye level. And I just remember like one of the few fans in attendance yelling out to James Blake, "You're losing to a guy who's wearing capri pants," because this was in Nadal's capri pant era. It was stunning what I saw. I saw an incredible athlete with an amount of topspin that I had not seen in the sport of tennis up to that point. He just had a very different game. And even at that time, he was young and you wondered if he was kind of brash, but he had a countenance about him, which made me think he could go far. For Federer, I think, I kind of came of age during the Sampras era. So for a long time, and again, remember, I wasn't focused solely on tennis. I was covering basketball and baseball. But I remember thinking that maybe Federer was just another Sampras. But when he won the French Open, to me, that was a pivotal point. And then for Djokovic, I mean, it's nothing jumps out at me. It's kind of like his game. It's just been over time. It wears you down, and it's hard to pinpoint any one thing. But I will say that I think the marquee win of his career was the win over Federer at Wimbledon in 2019. And that to me will always stand out as his greatest, most pivotal moment.
And I'm in such a different position in answering this question because I truly did begin to be a serious observer of tennis as I became old enough to be a serious observer of tennis, while, you know, Federer and Nadal were already extraordinarily good. And Novak, however, I do remember the transition from, oh, here's Djokovic, a guy who's very talented on the outside looking in, a contender, a threat. And then it was, no, he's one of them. He's in there. And I think the 2010 US Open semifinal, when he beat Roger, was probably the moment where I remember watching and expecting Federer to win. You know, and again, not as a diehard or a tennis intellectual, just expecting Federer to win and being like, oh, okay, Djokovic can do that. So that's kind of a moment that jumps out to me. Let's go to the next one. It comes from Ali, whose game style influenced both recreational and subsequent professional players the most out of the three. Ali weighs in here. He says, for me, for my part, I'd go with Rafa, and how he kind of changed the way players interpret topspin, even if a large part of it was advancing racket technology. So which player influenced the game the most, both recreationally and professionally? And I'll just add, before you guys weigh in, this is something that we talk so much about in the coverage of music, where it's not so much, oh, this album was so enjoyable, it was incredible to listen to, but artists in music are also measured on how many people tried to copy them, how many people went off that sound and ran with it. So this question reminds me of a music question, which is about influence.
So, okay, so carry on, Gill.
I think Ali's onto something. When
Right.
I look at men's tennis, and I go eeny, meeny, miny, mo on the top 100, and I pick a player, I think I see, you know, the biggest thing that I'm seeing right now is forehand centric, high margin aggression off the forehand wing, using the weapon of extreme levels of topspin to achieve a state of safety and damage all in the same package from the baseline. That to me is a very prevailing style that we see up and down the rankings now. And I don't really think, now I think there's a lot of Novak Djokovic like players, but I think that Nadal kind of heavy topspin thing is what I see most on the pro level.
I thought you were talking about Ivan Lendl. I thought you were talking about Andre Agassi. I mean, when I think of that model of playing of Agassi, maybe not as heavy topspin, but the idea of the forehand as a major battering shot that sets up the tempo of the point. But I don't know, I think it's a great question that's still to be determined, because they're still playing. And so, and the players who are influenced by them are in their formative 12-year-old state. They're 12 years old. You know, they're the ones who are taking them in. It's like when the younger players, because the contemporaries aren't going to change their game. You know, we're not going to see Denis Shapovalov now start hitting Nadal forehand now that he's been playing with the pros. He has his kind of forehand, which is good. And he's kind of an example in a way. You talk about using the forehand. I don't know. I could talk more about this, but Amy, what do you think?
I think for me, the answer to the question is Roger Federer. I think, you know, we've talked about how we don't do GOAT debate on this show, but a lot of the data points are pointing away from Roger, as a lot of his records fall away to Djokovic and Nadal. But if you want to argue influence, I think a lot of Roger's strokes, particularly the serve and the forehand, became something that it was almost like perfection that we should all shoot for. People would slow down to the frame and look at the tilt of his head, and they would look at, you know, which way his foot was pointing on the backhand volley, and they would look at his serve. I mean, God, his serve has been studied ad nauseum. the kick serve as well as the slice, and how he places it with such pinpoint accuracy. To me, Roger's had the greatest influence, maybe because Nadal's a lefty and he has an unconventional stroke, and Novak is still influencing. And it's interesting, and I think I brought this up before, that I heard Riley Opelka on another podcast saying that the forehands now are getting more linear again. They're not so topspin heavy. And what he's seen is a change within like the last 5 years. So who knows, maybe that's Novak's influence.
I think I like what you said about Federer. I think, and also when we talk about influence, maybe Federer as the notion of the wire-to-wire brilliant career of care and maintenance, and Novak too. So that's part of the influence of how you manage your body. Nadal and how you go about competing is somewhat influential, but how you assess influence is interesting. I think among recreational players, the emulation and almost fetishization of Federer is interesting, like the things you pointed out, Amy, the looking at the ball, the strokes. However, when I look at fingerprints on contemporary tennis and what I would tell juniors and how I see the pro game, we're living in the Novak world. I mean, and you see players like Nishikori and Goffin and Mackie McDonald, and kind of once upon a time there was we were living in a world of, let's say, a quality serve and volley, or body serves, make the first volley, pretty, meat and potatoes that way. So it's more like the way of Novak, of, the two-hander that's kind of the rock, and the forehand that the more the forehand improves, the better the results become, and kind of the craftsmanship. I mean, if I was, of our three, if you took a 11-year-old and said, here's the guy, this is the game this is kind of the game to emulate. It's probably closer to Novak than Roger. You like Roger? Good. You got to be patient. It's going to take a while to put all those parts and pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
People are enamored. That's the dynamic that's so fascinating. People are most enamored with how Roger plays. I agree with that. And Amy, you make the point about all the slow motion YouTube videos that you can find. Yeah. But is that to their detriment? I grew up at a certain point in my junior playing career, very early on. I wanted to play like Roger, and I wore Nike polos and swung a Wilson racket. I actually wanted to play like him because it was beautiful. I realized at a certain point that I can't. And that ended that. I no longer wanted to play like Roger because I realized that it's not how I'm going to be best. So it's interesting.
Well, this gets to a lot of things about the development cycle. It's kind of funny. Like I've talked to Roger is the most aspirational. No one has generated more swooning in the history of tennis than Roger Federer, right? It's just a pure aesthetic, the Baryshnikov, the movements. But I was talking to a parent once. They said, Roger, he's such a genius. How can you begin to emulate him? I said, I'm no genius, but I can hit a slice backhand and a topspin backhand in the same rally. Yeah. I can hit a drop shot approach. Now, the question with Roger to do it as well, there's a steeper learning curve than to do what Novak does as well. An 11-year-old can come out of the box and kind of like, okay, Novak, because Novak is very, very studied, and I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to be pretty airtight. And it allows him, it's like the way we've talked about how he wins tiebreakers. But I don't know. It's a wonderful question. It's something you could talk about forever.
It is a very good question. Thank you, Ollie. This next one comes from Racquet Talk. I'm going to shorten it. Essentially, they want to know who is the best interview out of the three. Who do we enjoy listening most to in the interview settings? Obviously, we can add some nuance to that in terms of what situation is best for each. Amy, who do you take the most enjoyment out of listening to interviews from?
I have to say, again, it's Roger, but I'm going to put a little caveat by that. Roger knows how to play the game. He knows how to look reporters in the eye and to come up with really thoughtful answers, where reporters will come away feeling really good about the experience of having interviewed Roger and want to write something positive about him. I'm just being honest. I call it like I see it. I mean, look, we're only human beings, you know. Rafa is a little bit more guarded. I have found him to be. Although recently I've noticed that, you know, he speaks his mind a little bit more in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. But just generally speaking, he doesn't seem to want to give away too much in an interview. And I feel like there's a whole personal life, a whole other side of Rafa that nobody has ever even come close to getting to the bottom of. And I've seen the 60 Minutes interview where I think it was Steve Croft went out to Mallorca, and that was good. I mean, that was really good. And yet I still don't feel like I totally know the man. Novak, now this is where the asterisk and the caveat. In some interviews, he's been extremely close to the best and tight, and he's not going to give you anything. In others, I think he's actually maybe the most honest and open. And I also think there's some real gems that we don't know about Novak, but they might be easier to get to someday.
Wow, I'd almost just say ditto for that answer. And then I would just add, I thought to myself, down the road, who would I want to interview most to get to learn more from, not just to get things. And I think that would be Novak at this stage of their evolution. I think Nadal has pretty much figured out what he can do and not do. And it's kind of like, hey, I speak plenty loud on the court, take that. And that's fine. And it's going to be okay. And Roger, it's like, yeah, you're great. And it's great. I've had a number of very engaging experiences with him, and I kind of know what they're going to be. I think Novak has more to be revealed. There will be more to be revealed in Novak, so that makes his future interviews more exciting.
So my answer would depend on the situation. I think that it's tough to get stuff out of Rafa. It's a little bit harder. In a funny situation, lighthearted, Roger. I think he does humor best. He's got, I think, a real knack for being lighthearted and funny. If it's a serious situation, I'm going to go Novak. I think he's most willing to just open up and give his unfiltered thoughts on something that has gravity and weight, and he'll be introspective and he'll get deep. So that's, for me, it's funny, Roger, serious, Novak.
To answer the question further, one thing about interviews overall, and I never let what tennis players say shape more than 49% of what I think about them. To me, what they do inside the lines is 51% or more. There was a player once, and one of my journalistic colleagues says, this guy plays good tennis, he's got nothing to say. It wasn't one of the three, by the way, it was someone else. And I said, you want to watch a sport, or you want to go interview a senator? You know, I'm not looking for people to say things. They say it, and the real challenge is to understand what they're saying with their racket and study that. And that's why I think what's fun about the show is we talk to coaches, we study the game, and that informs our ability to understand what they're doing, how they're speaking with their racket.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. Next one is from Jose. You guys probably get asked this a lot, but if only one of the big three existed during their era, would it be possible for him to have over 30 majors without the competition from the other two? Amy, what do you think?
Wow. Very profound hypothetical there, Jose. I'm going to say something like, since it's such a hypothetical, I'm just going to suspend reality and just allow myself to go there. I think what might have happened is that one player might have won so much that he retired earlier. I think it was having the other two there that kept these guys going for so long, has kept them going for so long. So I don't know if he actually would have reached 30. He may have stopped short of that.
the other fun way to add on to this question, this hypothetical question, which one is absent? So if it's Rafa, who gets all these Roland Garros goodies, right? If it's particularly Rafa, because no one has more of one of them than Rafa. So let's absent Rafa.
2 of them are absent though in this hypothetical. Keep that in mind.
Two. Okay, so which 2 are absent?
Yeah,
So
only one of them. It's if only one of them was around, would they get to 30?
Wow, kind of like we're in science fiction. This is really kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Like that never and does Federer therefore never have to improve his backhand because he has no Nadal? So he
Right.
slice.
Right.
Does what happens? Does Novak, does Guillermo Correa, after losing that 0-4 French from match point or 2 sets to love up, does he come back and he claims the French that he never got? And then does he beat Federer in the 0-8 final? Does, you know what I mean? It's like, does Robin Soderling, what of Robin Soderling, who lost finals 2 straight years to both of them? Does he win both of them now? I mean, all these, so I don't know. It's kind of, you could do a whole board game on it.
I mean, again, yeah, it's very hypothetical. I think Amy's right. I don't think, look, tennis is this is hard. Like, being out there, you need the fire to burn. You need a motivation. Right. I don't think anyone is going to be able to just run up the score and just keep going after, right? Like, I agree. I think they've all pushed each other. And I really don't think that any of them would have the fruitful and long careers that they have had, really, if the others didn't exist.
So if Federer is around, does Wawrinka, what comes of him? Does he not then get to play the 0-8 Olympics with Federer and be in Roger's shadow, which is actually helpful, even though it's not helpful? So what comes of Wawrinka or Tipsarevic? I'm just playing all these models through. Is David Ferrer now the king of clay? Yeah. I mean, it's just it's fun. And the thing about how they push each other, but someone else would have been pushing them too. Someone else would have been pushing that one maybe as well. I don't know what comes of Nalbandian.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, nobody could successfully push Federer when he was in his era of dominance. So we've seen what it looks like when, in that short span, you could say we did see what it looks like for only one, but Federer was chasing Sampras at that time, right?
Yeah, but
what happens when you're not chasing anything?
But whoa. His ankle was being grabbed by Nadal 3 months a year during those years, starting in, the 0-4 Miami was a jolt. Hey, this guy's here. Okay, and then the 0-5, remember, Federer loses the Australian Open semi in 0-5 to Safin, loses the Nadal semi. I mean, he's winning 2-3 slams a year, don't get me wrong, but he's aware that he's, that became, sometimes I remember reading, how could he be the best of all time if he's not the best of his era, and Clay and Rafa?
Okay, great point. This one is from Alex. What is the best single shot possessed by one of the big 3? To clarify the question, it's not surface or time period specific, and it's just the individual shot, not how it fits into the player's whole game. I actually think the best way, if I can ask the same question in a different way, is if you are a player, which shot would you want to have? Or if you had like a tennis playing child, which shot would you like to bless them with?
I think you had that one. Oh, go ahead, Amy.
I think it's so tough. Like, do I want Roger's serve or his forehand? I think I want his serve. So I want Roger's serve. I want Nadal's.
No, you only get one.
Oh, I only get one.
Yeah, you literally get
that's
one.
not fair. Yeah, if we're just talking about strokes, because there are other elements to Novak and Rafa that are outside of just strokes. So if we're just talking about strokes, then I think I'm going to pick Roger's forehand.
Well, and that fits into the other way to answer this question is which shot is the single best that is most kind of left its thumbprint, not even a fingerprint, on tennis in a big way. That's exactly the other way. And I think I'd have to say, each of the, I'm left-handed, so I guess it would be like Nadal's forehand, but I wouldn't mind Federer's forehand. I mean, those are to me the two mega shots, that the three, like if you just took them out and said, okay, these are the shots that have left their mark on the game in big ways, it's their respective forehands. Now, for the growing player, say, God, you could do pretty well with that Novak backhand. That would carry you a big.
Yeah, and I would say, like, read every book that Novak has written on nutrition, which I think he's only written one book on nutrition. Do that, stretch like he does, become like Gumby with his flexibility. And, there's so many other things that I would take from him and his game that aren't strokes necessarily, although I would love his forehand too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's totally fair. For me, I agree. I think it's either the candidates are the Federer serve, the Federer forehand, or the Nadal forehand. And I lean Nadal forehand, but a part of me wonders if there's a little bit of 2010s bias there, because I know that in the 2000s, it was the Federer forehand generally regarded as the better forehand between the two.
Well, Nadal, if you look at their arcs, these are great questions. And we could do this more often. This kind of opens up the tuna fish can to other ways of like exploring these guys. And Nadal is viewed in sort of the the specialist who blossomed through even as the 2008 Wimbledon, the 2009 Australian, the Career Slam of 2010. He's still seen as kind of an heir to Federer, right? Because Roger is still reigning and Roger's chasing Sampras, and Roger has more slams, and he attains the Career Slam in 2009. So there's this Roger hegemony of which Rafa's willingly playing that part too. How many times have we had Rafa say, Roger's better than me, he's great, yes. But now over the last 12 years, the tallies and the years and all that stuff have made it different.
From Andre, how active do you think the big three will be in retirement? Some, like Jordan, are everywhere because of their brands and personality. Others are more discreet, or like Brady, are still active. And more interestingly, how do you see the relationship between Nadal and Djokovic afterwards, since this one seems to be the most emotionally charged relationship, which I think is debatable. But let's start with, this is an interesting question. What do we see our three doing after tennis? Are there any, Joel, that you feel strongly about, that you feel pretty confident on, or no?
Active in the world, or also active in tennis? I think active in tennis. I actually think, I don't know why I thought of this. I think Novak wants to continue to play some kind of leadership role in aspect of the tennis. I could see him wanting to become the Serbian Davis Cup captain. I could see him doing stuff as Rafa has in some academy. And Rafa's already has his academy, so he's already kind of planted a seed for that. And more than a seed, it exists. So I think the one who's going to be more visible is going to be Novak in a way. I think that's what I think.
I think the fact that you brought up Michael Jordan is really good, because I think Roger could follow that template to a T. He's got his ons and his other business interests, and he's, a great ambassador for the sport, just like Michael Jordan is for basketball. So I could very much see that. I think Nadal would be the one that would retreat a little bit more into family life, maybe not to the extent that Sampras has, where like you just never see the guy anymore. But he's a homebody in Spain, maybe raising his kids, working at his academy, but not the big visibility that maybe Roger would have in business. And then I see Novak, quite frankly, potentially going into politics in some way. He does seem to be the most interested in making change for the better in terms of world issues such as climate, I know that's a big one for him. So I could see him, getting involved in big issues like with the United Nations or something like that, even bigger than and larger than tennis.
I think Novak is by far the most likely to coach. And I've seen that. Like Olga Danilovic is a young Serbian player, big tall lefty, who he seems to offer guidance to at will, like all the time. And I feel like he enjoys that role, and I do think he'll savor continuing to be around tennis. Where I kind of agree, like Roger, we're getting a taste of, yes, the family life, the kids, the privacy, the business ventures. And then with Rafa, you ask him what he likes. He says, I like boats, fishing, and golf. And none of those involve the public sphere. One of them isn't even on land. So that's how I see that shaking out.
I like that. I think I see, Federer as this global statesman. He'll have his corporate partnerships in the Labor Cup, so he'll have his across the board. I think Nadal doesn't want to think of himself as being a boss, a leader coach. It's like, that's not really his way. The academy, yes, the family, the kind of act local kind of thing. And I think Novak, I see Novak as more of that statesman. I think Serbian players, other players from the world, I'm impressed by the global aspects of Novak. You see him speaking Italian because he spent there. He has other parts in other parts of Europe and the world. And I think that's pretty neat. So I could see him being the segue, because he is by far a more important part of his country than the other two are to theirs. I mean, Federer is a cherished part of Switzerland, but the whole connection of Novak to Serbia and what that means to him is very powerful from that Davis Cup win. Arguably, we could say the Davis Cup win in 2010 was the real trigger that kicked into his great years. That, along with the earlier win over Federer at the US Open, but kind of his whole sense of himself.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's been a lot of pointing to that Davis Cup as the turning point, because that incredible 2011 season was directly preceded by it. Last one here from Prabesh. I know Federer has been surpassed by both Nadal and Djokovic, but do you believe that for Federer, it was more about chasing Sampras, and maybe he failed to keep an eye behind him and became complacent? Does having a target ahead make you more competitive as a chaser than somebody who is a runaway leader and has confidence? Or is it simply not true that Federer always felt the threat of Nadal in the beginning and never took the major count too lightly? We've touched on these themes already with the question about would either of them have gotten a 30 slams, the question of being the chaser versus being the chased. Joel, what do you think of this one?
I don't think Federer I don't think people get complacent about winning, and I don't think people live their career for slam count tallies. And I don't think Federer was, when he won Wimbledon in 2003, was thinking, how soon am I going to catch Pete at 14? I think he was thinking, get this one, get two, now get three, get the US Open, get this, get that. And things just become, and then maybe when you get within 2 or 3, it becomes, oh, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, I'd like to pass him now. So I think that was it for Roger. And look, remember, he's 5 years older than Nadal, which makes him 6 years older than Novak. And that is big, big in tennis.
I think Joel nailed it. I don't think that these guys have really thought too much about slam tally. Maybe in their quieter moments, the thought crosses their mind. But part of the greatness of these three guys and what is absolutely required in tennis is focus, whether it be focus on the point, the game, the set, the match, or the tournament that you're playing. And I don't think that any of them have ever allowed these questions to shake their focus, which is probably why they've been able to succeed.
Yeah, I think complacency would never enter the equation here. I do think in any sport or in any game, it's certainly not an advantage to go first. It's better to have a target and attempt to chase it. And we can get into, that's not just about numbers of titles. This is about as we've talked about all the time, play styles and what is Roger doing on the court and what do I need to do to defend against that or attack said weakness, right? So I do think, and I'll just give an analogy, right? But even in a sport as simplistic as, let's say, track and field, if you have a time to beat, that's better. That's an advantage if you have a time to beat versus go as fast as you can. So it's definitely an interesting wrinkle, I think. The fact that Federer had that head start, he had that era of dominance. And, you know, there's two schools of thought. There's Roger got to play without the peak Rafa and Novak. So that's an advantage. Well, wait a second. It's not so cut and dry. Roger didn't have that development with those targets in front of him that I think, especially for Novak, really drove him forward. So I don't think it's cut and dry like that. And I think it's an interesting dynamic. Well,
and remember, Novak, it was vivid. He spent 3 years at number 3, 4 years at number 3, and it was clear. And so those are the obstacles in front of him. And that's where you give the advantage. Just like Lendl had his times, Lendl had Connors and McEnroe, and he hired a lefty coach. Okay. So he's aware you're that high up the mountain. But when you're at another stage of the mountain, a track meet is not a career, right? A career is a whole other thing of basically, I think sometimes we look at the sport and the records from this Olympian view of the top in these resumes, and it's called win tomorrow's match. It's called get ready for next month's tournament. It's not called, yes, 3 weeks from now I'll come to the US Open. This will be my 32nd straight major. And I have this. I mean, of course, Roger was aware when he was winning consecutive slams. Oh, yes, it would be nice to win it 4 years in a row. Okay, practice tomorrow with Burdick. That's tomorrow. And then the day after that, I'm going to practice with David Ferrer. And what's the draw? And how's the weather? And what are my strings? I mean, the things that occupy the minds of the player preparing are so much different than the stuff we little hobgoblins get ourselves engaged by. So different. Well said. Good thing to keep in mind. And what a pleasure this was. Thank you to everyone who commented. Whether or not we got to it, it was really great to see. And also just in general, as Amy said at the beginning, we really appreciate the comments that are left all the time that we don't answer on videos. 100 episodes. It has been fantastic. Thank you to the viewers, Joel and Amy. Thank you to you guys. I'm sure the feeling is mutual of how great this has been, and it will continue. North American hardcourt swing around the corner, and we look forward to that. That'll do it for this episode of 3. Remember, we're available on all podcast platforms. Remember to leave a rating and a review on Apple, and if you are watching on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. We will see you next time on the next episode of 3.